Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
It all started on that Friday. Jason spent the entire morning with that uncomfortable feeling in his chest, a strange weight, as if something was about to happen and he still didn't know the extent of the impact. He tried to focus on work, but his mind kept going back to the conversation he had with Madison early that morning. She said she was going out with her friends that night, something common in her speech lately. Only that day, her tone sounded different. There was something strange in the way she avoided looking him in the eyes, as if she feared he would see something hidden. She was in a hurry, anxious, and carried her bag as if it held a heavy secret inside. Jason noticed every detail. Small things, but together they formed an impossible-to-ignore warning. During lunchtime, he could no longer concentrate on anything. Not even the taste of the food seemed important. He kept thinking about Madison's gaze, the way she avoided any affection, the forced smiles she had been handing out in recent weeks. Her coldness wasn't new, but that day everything seemed to have reached another level. Something inside him said there was much more behind this story of going out with friends. He didn't know if it was intuition or paranoia, but he wasn't willing to wait for the truth to fall into his lap. When he finished lunch, he made the decision that would change everything. Instead of returning to the office like he did every day, he took a detour and went straight home. He didn't tell anyone, didn't send a message. He wanted to see with his own eyes what was happening. On the way, his heart beat like an offbeat drum. Every mile driven seemed to increase the urgency in his chest. He tried to convince himself that he was overreacting, but the premonition didn't fade. On the contrary, it grew stronger with every second. As he turned the corner onto their street, something immediately caught his attention. A car with tinted windows was parked near the house, as if waiting for the right moment to disappear. Jason recognized that car right away. It didn't belong to any neighbor or someone passing through. He knew that model very well, knew exactly who it belonged to. As soon as he saw it, he felt his stomach churn. That image was enough. It was as if life itself was rubbing the truth in his face, without giving him a chance to escape. He parked further ahead, far enough not to raise suspicion. He grabbed his phone, activated the camera, and walked on foot to the back entrance of the house, the same one he always used when he wanted to go unnoticed. His heart was racing so fast it felt like it was about to jump out of his mouth. With each step, the air grew heavier. The door was unlocked, another clear sign that something was wrong. The house was immersed in an eerie silence, almost disturbing for a Friday afternoon. Jason kept his phone recording, fingers steady on the screen, and moved through the rooms until he reached the main hallway. That's when he heard the first muffled laughs, a low sound coming from the bedroom. Intimate laughter, full of complicity. His blood froze. With short breaths, he approached the slightly open door. One gentle push was enough for his world to collapse before his eyes. Madison was there, lying on the bed, her body entwined with Derek's. Derek Foster. The friend he considered a brother, his trusted business partner, the man who frequented his home like family. The two were completely absorbed, without the slightest shame, laughing as if they owned the world. Jason remained motionless, watching everything through the phone screen, recording every second of that repulsive scene. It was as if his brain refused to accept what was in front of his eyes. The two people he trusted most, destroying everything so blatantly. The pain hit him like a precise stab, but the anger was even stronger. He dropped the phone on the dresser and lunged at Derek, determined to tear apart every inch of that betrayal with his bare hands. He screamed, charged forward, but Derek, in panic, escaped in a humiliating manner. He ran toward the window and jumped, fleeing without even getting dressed, leaving behind the trail of a coward. Madison, in shock, curled up on the bed, her face pale and tears streaming down. She tried to say something, mumbling incoherent words, saying she had made a mistake, that it had been a moment of weakness. She writhed in sobs, desperately trying to justify what couldn't be justified. But Jason didn't listen. It was as if her voice didn't exist at that moment. He pointed firmly at the door, without needing to say anything. Madison, desperate, begged to stay, kneeling, pleading for forgiveness. She tried to grab his legs, begging for another chance. But Jason maintained his coldness. He opened the closet, grabbed her suitcases, and began stuffing her clothes, one by one, without caring about the crying or screams. Each piece thrown in was a piece of the life he was determined to bury. When he finished, he dragged the suitcases to the front door and threw them onto the porch, without looking back. Madison left carrying what was left, crying like someone who finally understood the magnitude of the damage she caused. Jason slammed the door shut, locked all the locks, and stood still, his chest still burning with anger and disgust. He picked up the phone, ended the recording, turned off the device and remained there, standing, staring at the emptiness of the living room, where every corner of the house now seemed to carry the weight of that betrayal. Her scent still lingered in the air, the pictures on the walls showed memories that had lost all meaning. Jason didn't cry. He just took a deep breath, knowing that afternoon had marked the end of an entire life. Nothing would ever be the same again. And, as painful as it was, that was only the first step. The next morning, Jason woke up without feeling any heaviness in his body. He slept little, but enough to wake up with a determined mind. The image of the betrayal, which the night before seemed like a fatal blow, now served as fuel. While preparing coffee, he knew the messages would start arriving. It was obvious that Madison would try to explain herself, just as Derek, despite his cowardly escape, wouldn't stay silent for long. And that's exactly what happened. As soon as he turned on his phone, it was flooded with dozens of notifications. Missed calls, messages, emails. Madison begged to talk. She wrote that she needed a chance to clarify everything, as if there was anything to explain after what he witnessed. Derek, on the other hand, sent cold messages, appealing to their long friendship, asking that he at least hear him out before making hasty decisions. Jason read every word with the calmness of someone who had already moved past anger. It was like watching a predictable movie where all the lines were rehearsed. Instead of responding, he archived everything. He knew those messages would be useful soon. He knew the laws well and understood exactly how to use them to his advantage. After a quick shower, he got dressed and went to his lawyer's office, who was already waiting with the necessary documents for the divorce. He presented all the evidence he had, the recorded images, the messages, the call logs. Everything detailed, everything timed. Each detail clearly showed the adultery and the breach of trust. In the state where he lived, the law still allowed adultery to be used as grounds for a contested divorce. It was a unique opportunity to resolve everything quickly and definitively. Jason didn't even need to explain much. The evidence spoke for itself. Within a few days, the petition was filed, with all the details organized to prevent Madison from contesting anything. She wouldn't even be able to touch the assets since the house and the company were acquired before the marriage, registered solely in his name. Moreover, her own behavior during the marriage eliminated any possibility of claims. While the process moved forward, Jason focused on the second part of his plan. There was something else that needed to be resolved with the same coldness. Derek was still a partner in the company, albeit with a small share. It was impossible to ignore this detail. They shared businesses, accounts, and contracts. But Jason knew exactly how to get out of this situation without losing control. He carefully reread the company's bylaws and smiled when he saw the clause he had inserted years earlier, foreseeing the right of first refusal. It was a card he kept hidden, and now was the perfect time to play it. With everything prepared, he scheduled a meeting with Derek, in a neutral location, away from prying eyes. He arrived with the contract in hand, accompanied by a lawyer, and got straight to the point. He offered a fair amount for Derek's share of the company, as the contract stipulated. He presented the terms clearly, leaving no room for negotiation. Derek, pressured and without arguments, accepted the offer. He knew refusing it would be useless. In a matter of minutes, he signed the paperwork, transferring his share and officially ending the partnership that had once been a source of pride for both. For Jason, that moment was symbolic. It wasn't just a business deal. It was the definitive closure of any connection between them. Derek's signature on those papers was, for him, a silent confession of guilt and cowardice. He stood up, picked up the signed contract, and left without saying a single word. Derek stayed behind, with a lost look, like someone watching their world crumble before their own mistakes. In the following days, Jason followed the progress of the divorce with the same discipline he always applied to his business. Each hearing was a victory. Madison couldn't argue at all. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge reviewed the documents, listened to the recordings, and didn't take long to make a decision. The marriage officially came to an end. The house remained with Jason. The company was already fully under his name. Madison left the courthouse carrying only the shame and memories of everything she destroyed. Jason, on the other hand, left with something much greater than assets or signed papers. He left with the conviction that he had regained control over his own life. Every move had been calculated. Every decision, thought out in meticulous detail. Now, without a wife or a business partner, he was finally free to move forward as he pleased. What few people knew was that, behind that calm face and apparent serenity, there were still plans to be executed. Plans that, soon, would show that the story was far from over. The purchase of Derek's share in the company was just the beginning. Jason wasn't satisfied with simply dissolving the partnership and finalizing the divorce. The betrayal he suffered had crossed all limits, and he would never accept that everything ended as if it were just another slip-up in the business world. There was something inside him that demanded retribution. Not out of wounded pride, but because of how Derek, over the years, had built an image of integrity while, in reality, wearing a mask. Jason spent days reviewing old contracts, email exchanges, meeting minutes, anything that could prove Derek's actions had directly harmed the company. And he didn't have to search hard. With every document read, the pieces fit together in an almost frightening way. There were records of decisions Derek had made without the knowledge of all the partners, favoring suppliers with whom he had personal relationships. Additionally, Jason realized that the wear and tear caused by the betrayal also affected the company's market position. Some old clients stopped closing contracts, citing discomfort in dealing with a company surrounded by internal scandals. With everything in hand, Jason consulted his lawyer again. He explained, in detail, the impact of Derek's actions, both internally and externally on the company's image. The experienced lawyer smiled as he heard the account. He said there was a legal path for this. A lawsuit based on a specific law that protects companies from intentional interference that harms their operations. It was called tortious interference with business relations. It was exactly what Jason needed. The lawsuit was filed with surgical precision. Every document attached, every message, every recording. Jason exposed everything, detailing how the betrayal wasn't just a personal issue but also a maneuver that weakened the company's reputation. The court received the case, and a few weeks later, the first hearing was scheduled. Derek was summoned and, in front of the judge, tried to maintain the demeanor of a serious and committed businessman. But as the evidence was presented, his expression began to change. The recordings showed much more than a simple extramarital affair. They revealed a duplicitous behavior, where Derek used the workplace to hide meetings, diverted clients, and, between the lines, undermined the company's image from within. The testimonies of former employees, confirming the toxic environment he created, were crucial to the case. Derek's defense tried to argue, claiming it was all a personal settlement between two ex-partners, but every attempt was easily dismantled by the robust evidence Jason had gathered. The judge, attentive to every detail, made it clear that he saw a serious case of intentional interference in commercial relations. After days of intense hearings, the verdict was delivered. Derek was ordered to return the full amount he received for selling his share of the company. Additionally, the court imposed a hefty fine for the damages caused, both financial and moral. The amount was so high that, for many, it would be impossible to pay without jeopardizing their entire personal assets. Jason didn't celebrate the decision immediately. He knew Derek's downfall was just beginning. As soon as the news spread, the few professional contacts Derek still had began to distance themselves. Doors that once opened easily for him started closing one by one. No one wanted to associate with someone with that kind of stain on their record. While Derek dealt with his own collapse, Jason turned his attention to Madison. The divorce was already finalized, but he knew there was one last wound to expose. During a careful review of personal finances, while organizing old documents, Jason found something that would change the course of the story. Among contracts and bank records, he discovered a series of suspicious transactions made by Madison months before the betrayal came to light. Significant amounts had been transferred to an unknown account, always with vague descriptions and weak justifications. Intrigued, Jason hired a specialized forensic accountant to investigate. The results revealed that Madison had embezzled money from joint accounts into a private fund, opened in the name of third parties, with the sole purpose of hiding resources before filing for separation. The transfers were meticulously planned, made gradually over the course of an entire year. She had built a sort of secret reserve, out of reach of any judicial agreement. This blow wasn't directly related to the betrayal, but it showed that Madison had been plotting a financial attack long before everything surfaced. She was ready to leave the marriage taking as much as possible, and the betrayal was just the trigger for a much larger plan. Jason gathered all the reports, bank records, and transaction receipts. Every penny embezzled was documented, and with this material in hand, he filed a new lawsuit against her, accusing her of fraud and concealment of assets during the marriage. This new lawsuit, based on concrete evidence, put Madison in an even worse situation. In court, she was forced to return all the money she had hidden, in addition to paying heavy fines and legal costs. The defeat was humiliating. She not only lost what she tried to protect but was also publicly branded as dishonest and opportunistic. Jason, upon closing the case, felt he had finally closed all doors to the past. The case became a local scandal. Madison, who had tried to rebuild her image as a victim of an unhappy marriage, saw her reputation destroyed publicly and definitively. During the hearing, it became clear that she not only betrayed but acted in a calculated manner to benefit financially. The judge didn't hesitate to hold her responsible, ordering her to pay a significant compensation. In the end, Jason recovered every cent he had lost and even received additional compensations. For many, the outcome seemed like a cold victory, but for him, it was the closing of a cycle of pain and disappointment. Derek lost all his assets, had to sell properties and vehicles to cover his debts. Madison, now bankrupt, was avoided even by old friends, who preferred to distance themselves from the scandal. Jason, on the other hand, remained silent. He never said a word about the matter publicly. He simply observed everything crumble in its own time, without rushing. Every move he made was calculated, like in a chess game where the opponent doesn't even realize they've lost until checkmate is delivered. Everything was in place. And what no one knew was that Jason still had more plans for the future. Plans he would keep hidden until the right moment to reveal them. Time passed like a storm that sweeps away everything in its path and then disappears, leaving only what is strong enough to remain standing. 2 years had gone by since the day Jason put an end to everything. The faces, the voices, and even the pain no longer occupied space in his routine. It was as if they had been ripped out and cast into some forgotten corner of memory. The city gossiped, as it always did, but for him, the only thing that mattered was the feeling of having won a war without raising his voice to anyone. Meanwhile, Derek's life turned into a complete disaster. He tried to recover, but with each attempt, more doors closed. Old contacts disappeared, investors avoided him, friends cut ties. Debts began to pile up, and one by one, the assets he had left were sold hastily, just to cover the judgments brought by the lawsuit. The properties, the cars, even the shares of smaller companies he had bought over the years, all were gone. The man who once paraded with an air of superiority now lived doing odd jobs, struggling to survive in a city that knew every detail of his downfall. In cafes, in conversations, his name came up as an example of arrogance and recklessness. Jason didn't mind hearing these stories. He knew it was all just the natural consequence of someone who chose the wrong path and laughed while betraying the people around him. Madison took a different path, but equally cruel. After losing the lawsuit, she had to sell what was left of her personal belongings to pay off the debts she had accumulated over the years. The friendships that had once been her refuge vanished. Gradually, people began to see her as a selfish and cold woman, marked by the scandals she herself fueled. She tried to rebuild her life alongside another man, someone she met during that forced fresh start. She clung to this new relationship as her last hope of escaping the image of defeat that followed her. At first, the relationship seemed like the rebirth she had longed for. But as the months went by, history repeated itself. She discovered that the man she shared a house with was having affairs with other women. Ironically, the same kind of betrayal she had orchestrated now replayed before her, only this time, she was on the opposite side of the story. Neighbors whispered on the streets about the constant fights, the frequent scandals in this new relationship. Madison lived surrounded by mistrust, jealousy, and an emptiness that neither luxury nor fleeting loves could fill. Meanwhile, Jason led a life many would consider enviable. After resolving all the lawsuits and fully clearing the company's name, he received an offer he never expected. A multinational group, known for its aggressive negotiating tactics, offered a multi-million-dollar sum to acquire the company he had rebuilt. He thought long and hard before accepting, but realized it was the right time to close that chapter once and for all. He signed the sale, transferred all operations, and, with the fortune deposited in his account, made a definitive decision. He packed his bags and moved to Miami, determined to start a new life, leaving no trace of what was left behind. He bought a spacious house where no one knew his name or his story. He opened a small local business, without grand ambitions, just to keep his mind busy and his heart at peace. His circle of friends was limited, consisting only of people who respected him for who he was at that moment, not for what he had achieved before. What many ignored was that, despite his apparent tranquility, Jason still kept track, from afar, of the consequences his decisions had provoked. At a casual dinner, while chatting with a childhood friend who was passing through the city, he heard a comment that fell like a kind of epilogue to everything that had happened. The friend mentioned, amidst laughter, that Madison had been betrayed by her current partner. He said that after so many ups and downs, she now lived embittered, trapped in an unhappy relationship, with no prospects of change. Jason didn't react with surprise. He simply listened, in silence, and continued his meal. At the end of the dinner, as he raised his glass, he toasted discreetly, with a faint smile and a phrase spoken almost like a whisper, something not directed at anyone but carrying the weight of all he had lived through. Without haste, he looked at the horizon and said to himself, with absolute serenity, like someone who understands the value of their own path, whoever destroys a home will sooner or later end up sweeping their own ashes. And with that, he definitively closed that chapter of his life, without regrets, with only the certainty that some victories don't need applause, because the true reward lies in the peace that only silence can offer. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.